for someone who has no idea what the podcast is about, how would you sum it up in your own words if somebody wants to know, okay, what is this all about?
I think, you know, it's kind of, as Elizabeth so perfectly put it, in the initial book, we were looking at, I suppose, the various ways in which to navigate various parts of your life, from dating, health, education, etc. And I think the thing with Slay in particular is we kind of, I suppose, almost took it back to Slay in Your Lane's original roots, which was that when Elizabeth initially came up with the idea, it was supposed to focus primarily on work. And because the conversations that we were having were essentially about our difficulties as navigating the workplace as young Black women. And this kind of takes it back to that and looks at, you know, the ways to thrive in your career, regardless of who you are. But we speak to, I think that's what me and Elizabeth are very good at doing, deferring, because we know when we don't know, like we know when someone else is better placed essentially to sort of give that advice. And whilst we do know many things, I'd say, we know that we're still relatively young. I don't know if we can say that as much as we used to when we were in our early 20s, but we're still, you know, 29 and 28. So whilst we've grown in our knowledge, there's still lots that we can learn. And I think we essentially got incredible women to speak to and ask them about their career journeys, their professional lives, their, you know, balancing it all. I think balancing is a really big thing for anyone, but specifically millennials who kind of, you know, we want to do it all. We're all about the side hustles, the personal brands, all of that. So yeah, we hope anyway that it sort of provides really kind of tangible and practical advice in terms of navigating your career life and slaying in it, for lack of a better phrase, or probably for the, you know, the best phrase to use.
How did you actually end up recording this Audible Original Podcast? How did it come about?
I think we had, like, do you know what it is? We published a book and we did loads of different events, and not everybody can, you know, always come to all of our events, even though we did travel across the country and do different events as much as we could. And we kind of realized that, you know, those same kind of questions were coming up about career-wise and things like that. And I think that it was very much like a natural evolution to kind of, you know, create something that people can always listen to outside of the book, and a bit of an update as well. So you know, saying it's 120,000 words, but it was written in like 2017, so a lot of the stuff is still very much relevant. But I think what was nice about the podcast, we were able to kind of go into different areas, and very specialized areas as well. So, like, you know, personal brands and how do you do this, and it was quite good to kind of, so that's how it came about. It was like a natural evolution from all the events that we did, and it was like, how can we kind of make it accessible to as many people as possible.
So you talked about the process of writing the book, but what's actually like the process of putting the podcast together? How long did it take, etc.? You know, how did you enjoy it? Were there bits that you didn't enjoy? Things like that.
I think we did it over a summer for like 2 weeks, and it went by really quickly. And I think it was just because we just honestly just came there as ourselves. So I think the podcast and everything we do essentially with like our book and everything like that, it's just us turning up and just asking questions and just being curious. So though and like when we said, we don't position ourselves as like we know it all, hence why even name the podcast How To was something that we were just like, oh, do we want to how to? We like to kind of, you know, tiptoe around those like terms. But I think how, in terms of recording the podcast and the advice I'd give, I think the most important thing is just try and be yourself as much as possible. And there were points where I was nervous to like interview Sharmadean. I was asking her questions, and the thing about Sharmadean is she asked the question back to us. And I remember, so I asked her a question about personal brands, and I said, do you think I was like, oh, your personal brand is da 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 da, and then she said, well, what do you think is my personal brand? She did not, she was like, the question and put it back at me, and I was like, and then Yomi was like, well, and I think that was the good thing, because just us, I guess, just being ourselves and bouncing off each other. But I think, so doing the podcast was just us turning up and just asking questions. And on the odd occasion, we got the interviewee asking us questions back. And it was just very authentic in that way.